in this country have to adjust to the way the country's adjusting. You know, if this were like 1965 or something, when my mother was a teenager, then you could go and get a job at Ford or GE or something, and you're going to be fine because they took care of their workers. There was a time where this country allowed things like labor unions, and they did things like hired Americans, and they would give you enough money to put in your 401k or your pension plan, and then they would get you'd have a steady job. The job wouldn't disappear. The wages would grow consistently. You had advocates. You don't have that anymore, and so what's really going to happen, and Dr. Claude Anderson talks about this a lot in Powernomics. He was warning back in the 90s that black people would perish by now, perish economically. Now, you're still here, of course. You haven't disappeared. But a large swath of our community has perished, has been completely wiped out of the white run economic system. Like they're just gone. They can't compete. They don't, the kid comes out of high school, he can't even get a job at McDonald's because he never learned how to read or count. So you have to show him pictures of the food to know which food item or what the total is going to be. And so for those of you that want to survive economically, I think you have to understand what your country is becoming. Your country is not the land of the free, home of the brave. It will never be, based on what I'm seeing, the land of equal opportunity. There's nothing indicating that that's going to happen. It's just a fairy tale. It will never even be a country. It will probably never even be a country that pays an adequate amount of reparations. If you're going to economically survive in America, you better stop doing what everybody else is doing. You really better stop with the whole, like, I'm going to, be a high paid slave routine, because America economically is in really, really bad shape. This country's in economic danger. First of all, the national debt is $27 trillion. Remember, the total revenue per year for the government is about $3 trillion. So that's like somebody who makes $30,000 a year that has $270,000 in student loan debt. Do you really think that a person who makes 30 grand a year, who owes more than $250,000 in student loans, is ever really going to pay back a debt, another debt, an optional debt like reparations? The reparations debt is about 15 trillion. So imagine a person who makes 30 grand a year. I want you to follow me with this analogy. Imagine the person makes 30 grand a year. They owe $250,000 in student loans. And then you tell them, oh, by the way, you also owe $150,000 to me. When are you going to pay me? But they don't have to pay you, right? Like, you're just like, well, you can pay me when you want to, right? Do you think they're going to pay you? Do you really think they're going to pay you? No, they're not. So this, so I'll talk about reparations. Like, I tell you guys what I think about it politically, but that's really more idealism than it is practicality at this particular time. So if you want to survive in America economically, you're going to have to adjust and understand that that you're going to have to earn what you get, and I'm not talking about getting up and going to work for a white man every day. Those jobs that used to be there for your parents, some of your parents, those jobs, the wages are terrible and they're not going up. There's no job security there anymore. There's no protection for the workers anymore. These people are the ones that are forced to pay higher taxes because they don't have advocacy in the government. And so corporations are making a ton of money because what they're doing is they're into globalization. The liberals are more globalist than the Republicans. The conservatives are more nationalists. Like, they're the ones who say things like, we need to create jobs at home. We need factories in Gary, Indiana, stuff like that. The liberals are more open borders, open this, open that. So that will put them more in the globalist category. The benefit of globalization is that wealth does go up during globalization. GDP goes up during globalization. The country makes more money during globalization. The problem is that wealth distribution is not properly regulated by your government officials. So it's like having 5 kids in the house, and let's say that the kids normally get 3 pounds of food, right, to eat. And then somebody says, well, let's change the policy. Now we're going to give the kids 20 pounds of food. But nobody, let's say nobody's there to make sure that the little child gets to eat. right? So what happens is the big kid is eating 20 pounds of food, so he becomes really obese. And the other kids are actually starving more, even though more food's coming through the door. But because nobody's there regulating the capitalism in the room, if you so to speak, then the little kid is going to starve. So the worker is the little skinny kid who doesn't get to eat, even though more food is coming through the door. So globalization does increase national wealth. All the GDP measures and all that, they go up with globalization. But the reason I'm a little bit more of a nationalist is because I believe that when these companies are hiring people, they shouldn't just be able to maximize profits by hiring workers in China that they could hire in the United States. I don't believe they should go put their factory in Mexico and not be penalized for it. If you're going to put a factory in Mexico, sure, but you're going to pay higher taxes than the company that puts their factory in the U.S. Nobody's doing that anymore. Your politicians aren't doing that because they're working for the corporatists and the capitalists. So the best way for you to survive economically as a black person is you must be an investor. You must align as much of your capital as possible with the corporatists, because the corporate people are the ones who are going to eat good. They're the ones the Jeff Bezos types are the ones who will never starve. So if you're an investor, say in Amazon stock, or you invested in Tesla or whatever, then when Elon Musk's net worth goes up to 150, 160, 100, whatever it is now, 180 $billion, well, then maybe your net worth goes up to $18,000 or $100,000 or $150,000, right? You're not making billions, but at least you're not starving. At least you're not left behind. The people that are not investing, mark my words, they are being left behind. They're gonna be left further behind. It's only gonna get worse. And a pandemic only serves to exacerbate inequality in a way that it's never going to recover. A lot of the work and the jobs that used to be physical have now gone digital. And what companies are finding is that it's cheaper to have all your workers work remotely anyway. So why not do everything on the computer now, right? So now they're just going to do the things that they always wanted to do anyway, and they're just going to do it faster because the shareholders are now saying, well, why should you go back and get that expensive office in New York City? Just let everybody work from home. So quality of life can go up, but you have to have different skills to get on that economic train. So maybe you could think of it like a neighborhood where there used to be streets that went through the neighborhood and the roads were really slow. You can only go 30 miles an hour. But now there's a highway that's on, going through the neighborhood, and you can go 70 miles an hour. Well, if you don't have a car that can run on the highway, if you're on foot or if you're on a bicycle, then you're going to really suffer while everyone else is kind of zipping past you. Investors are on the highway. Those who own real estate are on the highway. Those who own businesses are on the highway. So every black family that wants to survive economically should ensure that all your children know how to start a business. You should make sure that all your children know how to own stock and that you're buying them stock at every available opportunity. You should also make sure that your children understand that owning real estate is the best way to go. Renters make owners rich. Renters make landlords wealthy. So you don't want to be the person making someone else wealthy. You want to be the person making yourself wealthy, or at least maybe having other people make you wealthy. And that's why it's very dangerous when we get caught up in this fake symbolism of celebrating when black people go and save other people. I saw where, politically speaking, for example, Stacey Abrams saved the Democratic Party, but the Democratic Party didn't really seem to return the favor. You had the black man in the Capitol who saved the Capitol, and they're like, oh, we're going to give him an award. We're going to celebrate him and talk about him. Yeah, but you probably write his family a check. Write his family a $3 million check for putting his life on the line. And then I'll say, you go, brother. That's nice. Good deal for you. You put your life on the line and you got paid for it. But if you're just, celebrating the fact that you almost died for some people who would never die for you, by the way, mind you, they would never die for him, but he was ready to die for them, which is fine. He was doing his job. But that reminded me of slavery. You see, since slavery, you've been trained to benefit people, but they're not trained to benefit you. You've been trained to be the slave, and capitalism is real good at using the slave. So when you're being raised in households and raising your kids in households with a slave service mindset, then you're preparing them for capitalist slavery, because capitalism is they're gonna have to find somebody to exploit. So either you're gonna be a player or you're gonna get played. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so